welcome to another episode of Tesseract Talks, the place where we put the spotlight on tech trends, startups, and VCs. I'm your host, Marko, the founder and CEO of Tesseract Analytics, and it is my pleasure today to have Stephen Gray as our guest. He's a CEO and co-founder of the Code Registry, and the topic today will be innovation in software development. Stephen, welcome. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great. Thanks. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Great. Well, let's give listeners first context on your professional journey and how your career led you to co-found the Code Registry. Why don't we start there?
Sure. Definitely. So I am a developer at heart. I've been developing as long as I can remember, from a very young age. My professional career, which is about 20 years ago now, has been working within and running and starting sort of digital agencies, primarily in London, doing all sorts of web development and marketing and SEO and all that sort of stuff for many years. All sort of client-facing, service-based businesses, where we needed to work with a lot of different clients and all sorts of different sort of technical expertise and technical knowledge. And it culminated in my last digital agency, which was in North London, where we identified a gap in the market where we thought that non-technical business leaders, so not developers, non-technical business leaders and investors and stakeholders who we believe should understand what was going on in their code, which is critical to their business, and it was really important. They should be able to understand what's going on in their code in a way that's really easy to understand, non-technical, not full of jargon, because, they're often the ones paying the checks. They're often the ones that are deciding, where budget's being spent and so on. So we believe they should understand. And there was a gap in the market where that wasn't being served. We couldn't find a really good tool that would quickly produce these easy to understand reports on concepts that are by nature very complex. So that's where it came from. I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. I've started companies before, normally in the same sort of industry, agencies and e-commerce and that sort of thing. And I've done a lot of freelance work. So I've always had that sort of spirit in me, I think. And this was the first time where I thought we really identified a gap in the market that was really worth going after. And thankfully, our chairman and our investors and so on agree. So that's where it came from.
Great journey so far. Now, let's jump into the current state of the software industry. What are some of the biggest inefficiencies or pain points you see today from business leaders and executives when it comes to software development?
The core of the issue as we see it, and this doesn't apply to every web developer or development agency, but a lot of them, and it's a known thing, that is often, we're almost infamous for it, being a lack of transparency between the work that's being done or the issues that may be going on with the code project or how they're doing the work, or whether even if they're aware of issues in the code, between that layer and either the client or the non-technical business leader who's often paying for that work to be done. And it doesn't, it's not always on purpose. It's often just because you have coders and developers who are very technical. They're often not the best at speaking to non-technical clients and business leaders. That's just how a lot of us are. And then you have non-technical business leaders who, again, don't understand the technical terms and would assume, which is fair to assume, that those developers are correct and they're right and everything sounds great. Big thumbs up. Let's sign the check and move on to the next milestone without really understanding what are the core issues happening. Are there things going on that they're not saying? Are there things going on that was misunderstood between the interpretation of the technical and non-technical language? And I think over time, when issues arise, and we've seen this happen, it grows this sort of mistrust between the two people, the technicals and the non-technicals. And so, hours and hours can be spent in meetings going over everything. Oh, why is this slow? Why is this not happening? Why is this repeated bug? And often you may not get to the root cause. There may be sort of growing tension in these meetings where people get a bit angry about these things still ongoing. And we think that, when we created our platform, we used to do this sort of thing manually. So when we ran a digital agency in London, we would do these sorts of audits and understanding, clients would come to us and say, we've had all these sorts of issues with so-and-so an agency. Why is it happening? We would spend weeks and weeks in meetings auditing the code manually myself or with our team, coming up with these reports. And now the technology has got to a point where we can sort of automate this process and make it a lot easier, making it a lot quicker than I ever was, making it simple for people to do this, even if they're not technical. And some of that's down to, the way technology has grown with cloud services, ease of access, ease of use. Our platform is very quick at what it does, and that's because we can make use of these amazing cloud technologies that can scale very quickly, shoot off hundreds of processes that all run simultaneously. And, with the advent of AI, we can create this amazing package where we do all of that stuff with automation very quickly. We summarize it and display it in a way that's really easy to understand. to create this sort of complete package. But so I've gone a bit off tangent there, but that's where the core belief of where we saw those inefficiencies between the sort of the two layers.
And you already touched upon a bit about your platform. So can you tell us, how does your platform differ from existing solutions like SonarQube, BlackDuck, or Veracode?
Yeah, so those are great tools. There's a lot of great tools out there like that, which they'll do a bit of code security, they'll do a bit of code health, code quality maybe. They are not normally, and they say on their own websites and their own marketing, they're normally made for people like me. So they're made for developers. They're often tools that you use within a code editor, so within a terminal or within a panel within the code editor that talk to a developer directly about issues that have been found. They're absolutely great. And sometimes I'll even have a dashboard, and that dashboard may be great for a developer, but maybe less great for non-technical people to look at that. So my old MD or my old CEO at previous agencies who wasn't technical wouldn't log into GitHub or GitLab or wouldn't log into SonarQube to look at the dashboards because they wouldn't really quickly understand what they're looking at without, someone else helping them and explaining what the different things were. So where we differ is we are not a developer tool. We're not going after the developers. We think there's enough tools doing that, and they're great. As I said, we're going after those non-technical business leaders, investors, stakeholders who should have the same level, we believe should have the same level of understanding on the issues, but don't have the technical knowledge to back that up, which is fine. They're just in different roles. So that's where we differ. That's sort of our primary differentiating factor. And a few use cases where sort of we've seen the impact that can have. So for as an example, we worked with a VC close to Christmas. They were looking to do some sort of tech due diligence on a deal. They were essentially consulting on a merger and acquisition deal, a fair-sized one. They used our platform and they invited us to look at the data it found, and it found that 75% of all work ever done was done by about 4 developers, and our data showed that only 1 of them was still active, and the other 3 had probably left the company. So that alone is a risk, because all that knowledge of what the code is and how it works and how it was built is in one guy's head, and if he leaves, then what are they doing? Are they replacing him? Are they training someone up to retain some of that knowledge? So that was interesting. We had a very interesting one where a much smaller VC company was doing deal. They used our tool and it found so many issues that they actually fired the CTO of that portfolio company because it turned out that they'd been hiding things and we brought that level of transparency.
Wow.
Outside of like
use
VC.
case.
Yeah,
we won't mention who the company is, but that's amazing.
No names. Just an interesting use case. Another one that's worth mentioning is a small UK company. They do sort of recruitment app for like carers in the industry. It's really important. And they purely just wanted transparency on, okay, we're spending £20,000 a month for this UK-based development agency to do some work. I signed the checks from the CEO, signed the checks, but what are they actually doing each month? What's actually being done? How is it changing month to month? So they're using our platform just to get that transparency that, okay, well, we're signing the check, but also I can see who's doing what work, issues are going up and down, security issues are being fixed, that sort of thing, to give us sort of assurance and peace of mind, which we love to see.
Some amazing use cases. And you already mentioned briefly that your target audience are more non-technical people, probably like myself. But can you elaborate a bit more on like in general target audience? And also, can you share maybe your approach? How do you encourage adoption? Is it more open source, partnerships, incentives?
Yeah, so on the sort of the use cases of target audience, something that's tricky for marketing and tricky for outreach is that there's so many use cases. Like anyone that's got code that's critical to the running of the business could use our platform to provide some sort of time saving, some sort of value, but that's very broad. Our original use case was very similar to the one I mentioned of the UK carer recruitment app, where we thought there was going to be, well, we know there are a lot of small businesses who outsource their development and just want that transparency. Really, the two use cases and scenarios we're going after, like homing in on now with our marketing, are companies that do acquisitions or they consult on acquisition deals, and they use our platform to speed along their tech due diligence process, to provide more in-depth analysis or insights on their existing code due diligence processes, to help them along with those deals or have impact on the size of the deal, whether the deal goes forward or not, and so on. And the second use case is just any company with a large legacy code base. So we have, as an example, we have a company in the US. They are in a big insurtech business. They have legacy code base that they thought was only 2 or 3 million lines of code. They had a new CTO/CPO as a joint role. He wanted to discover what was going on in the code base very quickly. They were spending hours in meetings doing discovery calls on what licenses are they supposed to be compliant with, what packages are they using that are outdated. It turned out actually they had 23 million lines of code, which is something else we helped them discover because they had no idea. And it turned out there was code from 20 years ago that no one had ever looked at in many, many years and all sorts of stuff. So those are the two things, like M&A, consultancy and acquisition deals. And like any company that has a large legacy code base is where we're really honing in that marketing. In terms of sort of attribution, IP. Sorry, you said adoption. So in terms of adoption, one of our goals is to secure more partnerships this year. So we know that like a big part of our growth is going to be partnering with people like Webhost, for example. So Rackspace, like GoDaddy, they already host people's code. The code just sits there and serves a purpose, but they don't actually analyze that code and tell their customers, oh, you've got your code hosted with us. It's serving your website, and actually here's all the problems that we found in it that you could get fixed, and even work with us to get them fixed as an upsell. That nobody's doing that. No web hosts that we've seen are providing that sort of value add. And there's also things like cybersecurity insurance providers who we're talking to a few who want to use our platform as like a value add to customers, so that they get the cyber insurance from the company, but then they use our platform to avoid having to make claims, to stay on top of cybersecurity, to reduce security vulnerabilities, and so on. So we believe those sorts of partnerships are going to be a really big part of our growth. And other sort of widely used developer services like Git providers, where they're great, as I mentioned earlier, they're great developer tools, but a lot of them aren't actually currently at the moment going after those non-developers, those non-technical business leaders, where they could be, and they could use our platform to do so. So we're having some sort of conversations around that, which is quite interesting.
Because that opens so much more use cases. Like then,
like definitely.
When you start targeting non-technical people, it's a whole new kind of like
a whole new market
world and approach. Yeah,
definitely.
Oh, I mean, great. And so, what's next for the Code Registry? Any exciting plans or milestones lined up for this or next year?
Yeah, definitely. I think I have a roadmap as long as my arm, but the one at the moment is we are very excited about in the next few weeks releasing our own AI agent called Code IQ, so we set out with this goal, and we wanted to do it for a whole year, but now we have the technology, and we set out with a goal of, could we create an AI agent that could look through a code base the same way I used to when I was doing this at a previous agency, like replicating the code securely, looking through the code with various commands, doing web searches to do things like, is it the latest version? What's the alternatives? And then producing really detailed reports for the user. And we've, in the results we're seeing so far, they're very impressive. It's far quicker than I ever was, far cheaper than I ever was, to do those sort of really broad queries like, how do I modernize this code base? How do I change from one language to another? How do I start to pay down some of this technical debt? Or even non-technical things like, what's the coding practices like? How the developers been writing documentation? Anything broad that this agent can go through and find any of those sorts of answers, which is really cool. And outside of AI stuff, we're very keen to get our ISO 27001 security compliance. That's going to be done in the next few weeks, and then immediately SOC 2 will be started, which is going to be a lot of fun. But we're keen to get that for our own benefit and the benefit of customers, knowing that we're very on top of security and all that sort of stuff is important.
Well, exciting things lined up. We're going to be watching, keeping an eye out for that AI agent.
Yeah.
And maybe finally, do you have any advice for founders building in infrastructure or developer tooling?
It's an interesting question, because my main takeaway from the last couple of years is code analysis, code health, code security. These are all very noisy, very busy industries where, especially with AI now, there's a lot of people going after these areas. It helps to have a unique perspective, a unique take on things, where ours is like non-devs, non-developers. But it's definitely not easy. We've been blessed to be connected to some great people within our advisory network. Our original investors have been amazing. I think that's really important. I think you need to stick to your mission. Playing along with the market and adding features and stuff for the market is great, but sticking to your original belief and your original mission is really important. And believing in the product, 100%. Startups are hard, but if you can believe in your product right from word go and stick to your guns, I think, that's very important. And that has definitely been important for us.
Sounds great. Well, thank you so much, Stephen, for coming to the show and sharing these valuable insights. That was all for today, and I hope we will catch up in future on another episode. Perhaps next year when you have all these new updates, or maybe we meet up here in London, because we're not far away from each other.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah, thank you. And to our audience, until the next episode. Bye.